Most people building an emergency food supply are making one critical mistake. They're stocking the wrong canned foods, and when a real crisis hits, those shelves will let them down completely. You might have hundreds of cans already, but if they're low in calories, low in protein, or impossible to turn into an actual meal, you're not prepared. You just feel prepared. That difference could cost you everything. Today we're going through 7 categories of canned foods that actually pull their weight, not just foods that sit on a shelf looking useful. Foods that deliver real nutrition, serious calories, long shelf life, and the ability to build actual meals when it counts most. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of exactly what belongs in your long-term storage and exactly why each one earns its spot. Before we get into the list, understand one thing. These canned foods are not meant to replace your foundation storage: the rice, the wheat, the oats, the dried beans. Those core staples are still the backbone of any serious food supply. What these 7 categories do is make those foundation foods actually usable. They add flavor, texture, nutrition, and variety. They're the bridge between a bucket of rice and a real meal that a person actually wants to eat. Without foods like these, survival eating becomes a grind. People lose morale. They stop eating enough because everything tastes the same. These 7 categories solve that problem, and they do it with foods that store well, cost relatively little, and work across dozens of different meal combinations. So let's start at the beginning. Category 1, base foods. This is the category most people overlook because these foods don't look exciting on their own. We're talking about diced tomatoes, crushed tomatoes, tomato sauce, cream-based condensed soups, broths, and pasta, or Alfredo-style sauces. None of these are particularly thrilling straight from the can. But that's not the point. The point is what they do to everything else around them. Think about what a can of broth does to plain rice, or what a can of cream of mushroom soup does to a simple grain dish. It transforms it. Suddenly you have texture, depth, and something that actually resembles a meal rather than survival rations. That's the function of base foods, and it's a function that most people underestimate until they're actually trying to cook in a stress situation with limited resources. Among all the base food options, the single most versatile pick is diced tomatoes. This one product can be used in soups, stews, rice dishes, bean dishes, pasta, and more. It's highly adaptable and pairs well with almost every other food category on this list. One thing worth noting, tomato-based products are acidic, which gives them a slightly shorter shelf life compared to other canned goods. They're still shelf-stable for years, but if you're rotating stock, keep that in mind. Now here's a question worth considering. What would your emergency meals actually taste like without any of these base foods? Imagine eating plain rice or plain lentils every single day, multiple times a day, with nothing added. That's what your storage looks like without this category. That reality is why base foods should be one of the first things you stock, not an afterthought. Moving into category 2. Vegetables. Vegetables are tricky in a survival context because most of them are nutritionally strong but calorically weak. And when you're in a grid-down situation or a prolonged emergency, calories are currency. You need dense, usable energy from every item on your shelf. Let's look at how some common choices stack up. Spinach, about 20 calories per serving, rich in vitamins, but essentially nothing in terms of energy. Green beans, roughly 70 calories for the entire can. Carrots, a little better at around 70 calories per serving. These aren't bad foods, but they're not going to keep you fueled through a demanding day. Sweet potatoes are different. Sweet potatoes come in at around 120 calories per serving, and many cans contain multiple servings. And that's a meaningful caloric contribution. And beyond the calories, sweet potatoes are nutritionally dense, loaded with vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, and fiber. They're one of the few canned vegetables that can genuinely move the needle on both energy and nutrition simultaneously. The closest competitor to sweet potatoes in the calorie column is regular white potato. White potatoes are a solid option. But sweet potatoes have the edge when it comes to overall micronutrient content. It's not a close comparison. You'll often find sweet potatoes canned in syrup. From a pure health perspective in normal life, that's not ideal. But in an emergency food context, where every calorie has value, the extra sugar is actually a feature, not a flaw. It means more energy per can, and energy is what keeps people functioning when the grid goes down. So when it comes to vegetables, sweet potatoes win. Stock them heavily. Category 3. Beans and legumes. This category is where a lot of preppers are already on track, because beans are a well-known survival staple, and for good reason. Beans are calorie-dense, protein-rich, full of fiber, and incredibly versatile. Almost any variety of canned bean is a good addition to long-term storage. But if you're choosing one option to prioritize, make it lentils. Why lentils over other beans? A few reasons. Lentils tend to be slightly higher in protein than most other legumes. Their fiber content is equal to or better than the average bean. They're nutritionally dense across multiple dimensions: iron, folate, manganese, and more. Their texture is softer and easier to work with in cooking, especially when fuel and cooking time might be limited. And perhaps most importantly, lentils integrate into a wider variety of meals than most beans. Here's the really powerful part of stocking lentils. When you combine lentils with rice, you create a complete protein. That means your body receives all of the essential amino acids it needs from two simple, affordable, long shelf life ingredients. No meat required, no complicated combinations, just lentils and rice, and you have a nutritionally complete, filling, high-energy meal. In a long-term emergency, that combination becomes one of your most important daily meals. Stock enough of both to rely on it regularly. Is there a better protein source in the world that stores as well, costs as little, and works as hard as lentils combined with rice? It's a serious question, and the answer is probably not. Category 4. Fruit. Fruit often gets dismissed in survival planning. It feels like a luxury, but fruit is delivering hydration, vitamins, natural sugars for energy, and morale benefits that are hard to put a number on. When everything else in your storage is savory and dense, fruit becomes something people actually look forward to. That matters more than most people think in a prolonged, stressful situation. Fruit comes canned in a few different ways: heavy syrup, light syrup, and fruit juice. The sweetness and sugar content vary significantly depending on the packing liquid. Here's the logic on which to choose. Sweet potatoes packed in syrup made sense because the vegetable itself isn't inherently sweet and the syrup adds useful calories. Fruit is already sweet. It already carries its own natural sugars. Adding a heavy syrup on top of that is excessive, more sugar than you need without meaningful added nutrition. So for canned fruit, the best choice is fruit packed in its own juice. That keeps the natural benefit of the fruit intact, reduces unnecessary added sugar, and still gives you the hydration and sweetness that makes fruit worth having. And which specific fruit to prioritize? Pineapple. Pineapple delivers a strong vitamin and mineral profile, meaningful hydration, and natural sweetness that's genuinely satisfying. But what makes pineapple stand out is an enzyme it contains called bromelain. Bromelain supports digestion, and in a situation where your diet has shifted dramatically, more beans, more grains, less variety, digestive support is not a minor benefit. It's something that can make daily life noticeably more comfortable. If you want to diversify beyond pineapple, mandarin oranges are an excellent second choice for their vitamin C content. Mixed fruit that includes pineapple also works well and gives you a broader spectrum of nutrients. But pineapple should be the anchor of your fruit storage. Category 5. Canned fish. This is one of the most underrated categories in the entire list. Canned fish is exceptionally nutrient-dense, shelf-stable, ready to eat without cooking in most cases, and delivers a type of nutrition, specifically omega-3 fatty acids and high-quality protein, that is nearly impossible to replicate from plant sources alone. Not all canned fish is equal, though. Wild-caught fish is meaningfully superior to farm-raised when it comes to nutritional quality, particularly omega-3 content. When you're buying canned fish for long-term storage, wild-caught is the standard to aim for. There are 3 general categories of canned fish worth understanding. The first category is ready-to-eat, no-prep fish. Sardines fit here along with similar small fish. Open the can and eat. No cooking, no preparation, no fuel required. The second category involves fish that typically work better with some cooking or meal prep. Canned salmon and jack mackerel fall into this group. They're nutritious and versatile, but they're best used as ingredients in a cooked meal rather than eaten straight. The third category is primarily tuna. Tuna sits in between, ready to eat on its own, but also highly functional in recipes. It's one of the most flexible proteins in the canned fish world. Of all these options, the single best choice is sardines packed in olive oil, ideally extra virgin olive oil. Here's why sardines win. The protein content is high. The omega-3 fatty acid content is among the best of any canned fish. The olive oil does something important. It increases the bioavailability of nutrients in the fish, meaning your body actually absorbs more of what you're eating. And sardines require 0 preparation. Open the can, eat the contents. That last point is more valuable than it sounds in an emergency situation. When you're tired, stressed, resources are limited, or you simply cannot cook, sardines are ready. No fuel, no time, no equipment. Yes, sardines are not everyone's first choice for flavor, that's fair. But their nutritional output per gram, per can, and per dollar is extraordinary. They earn their place in long-term storage. Here's something important to understand about shelf life in general before we continue to Category 6. Canned food is often thought of as having a hard expiration date, a point past which it's no longer safe or useful. That's not accurate. Best by dates are guidelines set by manufacturers, not safety cutoffs. A can of salmon sitting in proper storage conditions will remain safe and nutritious well beyond its printed date, years beyond it in many cases. The key factors are storage temperature, avoiding physical damage to cans, and keeping them in a dry, stable environment. When those conditions are met, canned food regularly outlasts its label by significant margins. This is one of the most important things to understand when building long-term food storage. The goal is to stock correctly, store correctly, and get maximum use out of every item you put on that shelf. Category 6. Canned meat. And this is the category most people get excited about, and it delivers. Canned meat is protein, it's satiety, it's the ingredient that makes a meal feel like an actual meal rather than just fuel. Among all the available options, canned beef, canned pork, canned turkey, canned chicken, one stands above the rest in terms of practical value: chicken. Canned chicken is not the most exciting answer, but it is the correct one, and here's why. First, versatility. Canned chicken works in soups, stews, rice dishes, flatbread sandwiches, mixed grain bowls, quick no-cook preparations, and dozens of other applications. It pairs with virtually every other category on this list, without friction. Second, ease of use. Canned chicken requires minimal preparation. Open the can, drain if needed, and incorporate it into whatever you're making. In a low-resource environment, that simplicity has real value. Third, it combines naturally with foundation foods, rice and chicken, lentils and chicken, chicken in a tomato-based stew, chicken in a broth with vegetables. These combinations are intuitive, satisfying, and nutritionally well-rounded. Now, canned beef does have certain advantages. Beef tends to be higher in iron and zinc, two minerals that are important for long-term health. If you have the storage capacity, adding some canned beef for those mineral benefits is worth doing. But as the single go-to canned meat option, chicken is the practical winner because of how easily it integrates into the widest range of meal types. Is there any other protein source in the canned food world that gives you this much flexibility across this many different meal contexts? Think about it. But the answer really is no. Category 7. Meals in a can. We've spent most of this video on ingredients, foods that require some assembly, some combining, some cooking, and that's appropriate because most of your meals in a long-term situation will involve preparation. But there will be moments when preparation is not possible, when you're exhausted, when time is short, when circumstances simply don't allow for a cooking process. That's when you need something ready right now, something you can open and eat immediately without heating if necessary, and get a complete, nutritionally adequate meal from a single can. That's what meals in a can provide, and the best option in this category is chili with beans. Why chili specifically and not other complete meal options? Let's work through it. Canned soups are common and familiar, but most of them are too low in calories to function as a real meal. A can of soup might give you 200 calories. In an emergency situation, that is not a meal. It is a snack at best, and a small one at that. Canned pasta dishes have the convenience factor, but are generally lacking in nutritional breadth. The pasta itself is a refined carbohydrate without much else to offer beyond energy. The ratio of carbohydrates to protein to fat is imbalanced, and the micronutrient content tends to be limited. Beef stew is a decent option. It provides meaningful protein and a reasonable calorie count. But beef stew is always beef, every can, every meal. That becomes limiting when you're eating from storage for extended periods. Chili solves several of these problems at once. Chili delivers all three macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, in a reasonably balanced ratio. The beans contribute substantial fiber and additional protein. The meat provides protein and fat and satiety. The overall calorie count is significantly better than most canned soups, and perhaps most importantly, chili comes in multiple protein variations. Beef chili, chicken chili, turkey chili. That variety matters for long-term storage because variety maintains morale and reduces palate fatigue. When you can choose the meat in your chili, you're not locked into one flavor profile for every emergency meal. You have options. In a prolonged situation, options matter enormously. Chili with beans is also naturally satisfying in a way that many other ready-to-eat canned meals are not. The fiber content from the beans means you stay full longer. The caloric density means a single can actually does the job of a meal. It is the strongest single option ready-to-eat food you can keep in your storage for moments when there is no time to cook. So let's bring all 7 together. 1. Base foods. Diced tomatoes, broths, cream soups, sauces. These make everything else in your storage actually usable and turn raw ingredients into real meals. 2. Vegetables, with sweet potatoes as the clear leader for their calorie and nutrient density, especially important when calories count most. 3. Beans and legumes, with lentils as the top pick for protein, fiber, and their ability to combine with rice for a complete protein without any meat. 4. Fruit, specifically pineapple packed in fruit juice, for vitamins, digestion support, hydration, and the kind of variety that keeps morale intact. 5. Canned fish, with sardines packed in olive oil as the highest output option for omega-3s, protein, and zero prep convenience. 6. Canned meat, chicken, as the most versatile, most meal-friendly protein for building a wide range of dishes across your entire food storage system. 7. Meals in a can, chili with beans as the ready-to-eat option that actually delivers complete nutrition, adequate calories, and genuine satisfaction in a single can. Each of these 7 categories serves a distinct function. They fill gaps, add nutrition, improve flavor, and make long-term eating sustainable rather than just survivable. That distinction matters. You're not just trying to stay alive, you're trying to maintain your health, your energy, and your ability to function and make good decisions under pressure. The wrong food supply makes that harder. The right one makes it possible. Here's what most people get wrong when they approach canned food storage. They shop by price and familiarity. They buy what's on sale, what they recognize, what feels safe and easy, and they end up with a shelf full of canned corn and tomato soup that won't sustain them for more than a few weeks. The 7 categories in this video exist because they were selected on the basis of nutrition, calories, shelf life, versatility, and real-world meal-building function. Not because they're cheap or familiar, because they work. Stock your storage with intention. Every can on that shelf should earn its place. Think about where you currently stand. Look at what you already have in storage. Now ask yourself, do you have all 7 of these categories represented? Do you have enough of each? Are there gaps in your caloric coverage? Are there gaps in your protein sources? Are there meals you couldn't build with what you currently have? Those gaps are worth finding now before you ever need to rely on what's there. One more practical point on shelf life. The best by date printed on a can is not the date the food becomes dangerous. Manufacturers set those dates conservatively. With proper storage, cool, dry, dark, stable conditions, canned food retains its safety and much of its nutrition well beyond that printed date. Understanding this gives you flexibility in how you rotate and use your storage, and it also means that foods you've been storing longer than expected are likely still completely viable. The key is checking your cans. No swelling, no leaking, no rust penetrating the can itself, no foul odor on opening. Those are your real indicators. A date on the label is just a starting point. If you're serious about building a food supply that actually performs when you need it, these 7 categories form the foundation of your canned goods strategy, not the flashy survival branded products, not the overpriced freeze-dried meals that cost 10 times more and taste half as good. Real food, well-selected, properly stored, and intelligently rotated. Canned food done right is not glamorous. It is effective, and effective is what matters. Here's a final thought before we wrap. The difference between someone who survives a crisis and someone who thrives through it is often not gear, not location, not skills. It's food. Consistent, nutritious, varied, adequate food. It maintains physical capacity. It supports mental clarity. It keeps a family stable when everything around them is not. Building that food supply is one of the most concrete, actionable things you can do right now, not someday, now. And because the time to stock a shelf is before you need it, not after. If this video gave you something useful, do me a favor, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are trying to get prepared. And this channel is called My Channel for a reason. We do this right, we do it thoroughly, and we don't cut corners. Subscribe if you haven't already. Because there's a lot more coming on this exact topic, what to store, how to store it, and how to build a food system that actually works when everything else doesn't. See you in the next one.